they were working with the advertising agency that does Louis Vuitton. So phenomenal, global paid media agency. And the ROAS with Louis Vuitton, let's say, was God knows, 30, 100, whatever it was. Very good,
Yeah.
let's say.
Yeah.
Same strategy, same special sauce, same structure, same framework, same teaching, same everything applied to this other brand, delivering a ROAS of 1.5. Same agency, same account manager, same strategy, but vastly different results. So I say to the brand, so what, you tell me what the difference is. The difference is you. The difference is what you're putting out there.
Hello and welcome. I'm Elizabeth Formosa, the founder of Fashion Equipped and devourer of all things fashion, business, and mindset. In this podcast, I'm speaking with thought leaders, change makers, and entrepreneurs about the business side of fashion and everything in between. Fashion Business Mindset is your front row seat to real stories from designers, brands, entrepreneurs, makers, and mentors. We'll discuss how to launch and grow a fashion business and give you insider access to the future of fashion. So let's do this together and ensure that you're equipped to make the fashion business your business. Welcome back to Fashion Business Mindset. My guest today is Paul Waddy. Paul is an advisor to some of Australia's leading online retailers through his consultancy, Paul Waddy Ecommerce. And he's the co-founder of Ecom Nation, a digital marketing agency. Paul has made an impact as the best-selling author of Shopify for Dummies, which soared to the #1 spot in Amazon's retail category in 2022. In 2023, Paul launched Learn Ecommerce, an online learning platform designed to help people change their lives using e-commerce as their vehicle. He's also an advisory board member at the National Online Retail Association, and in 2022, he received the prestigious Industry Recognition Award at the Online Retail Industry Awards. Today, we're diving deep into scaling fashion e-commerce as we discuss profitability, data-driven decision-making, and how innovation and technology are shaping the future of online retail. Whether you're an established fashion brand or just starting out in the e-commerce space, Paul's insights are invaluable. So let's dive in. Paul, welcome to the Fashion Business Mindset podcast.
Thank you so much for having me on. I'm excited.
Now, Paul, to kick things off, I would love it if you'd share a little bit about your background and how you became a leading expert in the e-commerce space.
Yeah, well, it started a very long time ago now, probably a little longer than I'd like to admit, but I sort of left school, graduated in 2000 and worked in retail and didn't really know what I wanted to do, but had a desire to own a business. Just always wanted to own a business. And I actually started a men's footwear business. I um I remember going out one day and looking for some shoes and, trying to avoid these white chunky leather shoes that were doing the rounds, and I wanted a pair of nice kind of European looking shoes, and they were so expensive and I couldn't find anything sort of under $200. So I decided to take a few trips to Guangzhou in China and see what I could find. And I lugged back a few suitcases of samples. I hit the streets of Sydney and Melbourne and Brisbane and wherever, and I started getting wholesale accounts, taking indent orders and getting wholesale accounts, and um, pretty raw at business, but had some good success getting accounts, and eventually got into David Jones, all of David Jones stores, and ASOS overseas, and the Iconic when they started, and there's a lot of stores. And then I opened a few stores. So I thought that was going to be my thing, having retail, brick and mortar, and with a bit of wholesale. I thought that was the answer. And then I found that pretty difficult to manage cash flow and to be so reliant on other people, whether that be pedestrian traffic or whether that be wholesale accounts. And I I started tinkering in e-commerce, and I built a website on Magento in 2007. But around that time, I also sold on eBay's fashion gallery. I sold on Groupon, on, any platform, Catcher the like all of them, all Oz Sale, you name it. And then when Amazon came here, I was straight onto Amazon as well. So I was just selling stuff online, and found that I liked that. I thought that I was used to getting the worst positions in shopping centers and having to pay the worst square meter rate. And I liked that you could kind of leverage your skills and smarts and this kind of fast growing industry of ecom and get ahead of like my stockists at David Jones, like get ahead of those guys. And I found that it was just really leveling the playing field for people with less capital. And that was fun. And so I doubled down on that and sort of found my home there, and then sold that business and went to Showpo. Showpo, we had, a great ride there. I was the head of operations. So sort of stuck in that fashion space, but in the women's fashion space. And then went into become the CEO of The Horse, which is a watch and leather goods company. And during that time, I started consulting. People started asking me to consult. My first clients was Babyboo Fashion, who I still work with. So again, back to women's fashion. Oz Hair and Beauty, some brands started wanting to work together. And that kind of became, I thought, oh, I like this consulting gig. So I started coaching online businesses of all sorts. And over the journey, managed to write this book, Shopify for Dummies, which went #1 on Amazon in the US. And whenever I can get my act together, the second book will be out, which is Selling Online for Dummies. Finished it, but just going through the horrific editing process. And kind of just loved this whole space. I became the chair of the National Online Retail Association, threw myself into that, and really just doubled down. I launched Learn Ecommerce, which is my business. I coach hundreds of brands in there, ecom brands, and then co-founded Ecom Nation, which was recently named Australia's best digital marketing agency for retail. So just in that space, loving it, getting amongst it, and trying to help brands, crack this e-commerce nut, I guess.
I love it. I love what you're doing in the consulting space, and I love the diversity of your what you're offering in terms of really helping the smaller businesses, the startups,
Yeah.
right through the high scale businesses. I would love to know, what was your footwear brand name?
It was called Antoine and Stanley. And Antoine was my business partner's middle name, and Stanley is my middle name.
Love it. Love
And
it. I'm sure some of our listeners will remember it.
I still see it worn a little bit.
Yeah.
And if I had my time again, the amount of times people asked me to spell that, I would have just, I reckon we lost heaps of traffic for that. So I would have definitely gone with something much more simple.
So does it still exist? Did you sell the brand?
No, it doesn't. I don't think it existed. We sold exists anymore. I had
Yeah.
some investors, and to be honest with you, I didn't really enjoy that process. I thought that was going to be really amazing to take it to the next level and open more stores, and I just found that was probably not the right people and not the right fit. And I guess they wanted to open more stores, and I was just finding my passion in e-commerce, which
Yeah.
wasn't really their vibe. And in the end, I just honestly just had enough, and it became a massive burden to me. And I decided to go out and do an MBA, which I did,
Yeah.
and then go out into Showpo because I'd met Jane Liu before, and I loved what they were doing, and I was like, I just want to be a part of that journey, whatever's happening there.
Love it. When when it's time to move
Yeah,
on, right? And let go of
totally.
something.
Yeah.
I would love to dive into how you fine tuned your own e-commerce skills, because you've gone from the wholesale model combined with brick and mortar, but your
Right.
passion was in e-com. How did you fine tune and elevate your own skills over time, Paul?
I think, when I was 23, I borrowed money and started my business. So I had that crushing weight of debt on my back, and there's nothing like a bit of pressure to get you moving.
Yeah.
And then later I had shareholders as well, which is also pretty stressful. And so what was happening is I was profitable in that business, but never had money. Like my bank account was just always depleting, and I just couldn't understand why. And so I made it my mission to understand I guess, the skill of making money. And I know that sounds weird, but how much inventory to order, the way my brain works is that there's got to be logic tied to it, to everything somehow. There's
Yeah.
got to be a system. And so I just spent a lot of time I'm trying to research systems. So what I mean by that is if I didn't understand the concept of, let's say, inventory is usually what sinks a business in fashion, or in most cases, I started researching the heck out of open to buy and how to calculate that, and how that and how that is impacted by your margins, how that's impacted by your planned sales, and if your planned sales targets are off, your open to buy is off, your cash is then off, and that change. So what I would do is I would pick something where I wasn't very strong, like at that moment, let's say COGS or open to buy, and I would find people to teach me. And that could mean people here, like my friend Neil Livingston was the CFO of MJ Bale at the time. And I was like, mate, teach me COGS, teach me numbers. I'm not good at them. Teach me, teach me. And I would obsess about them until I got it. And I wouldn't stop until the penny would drop. Another example of that would be, let's say, conversion rate, right? If I wanted to understand, or Google Analytics, if I wasn't very good at it, I would post ads on Upwork or Fiverr or something, and I would pay people to tutor me on certain things. So I would just post a job saying, I want to learn these 4 things. I will pay you, teach me. And I just am very single-minded with that and methodical in the way that I go about it, because there's not really there's a lot of nonsense out there, I guess, on how you grow a business and just scale and pay your way and this and that. But I've been there, like I've borrowed money, I've mortgaged my grandfather's house, and I've seen in my business, and I'm sure you have too, when you coach people who have made horrific mistakes on the back of bad advice.
Yeah.
And those can end your, like, we're dealing with people, and I'm sure you are too, who are mortgaging their houses and they're borrowing money. And it's like, wow, hang on, I've got an obligation as a coach to make sure that I know this stuff inside out. And so that was my approach, is to research what I didn't know and never be afraid to test. So I would test eBay, I would test Amazon, I would test, and now if someone says, should I sell on Amazon? I'm like, look, in my experience, not great for fashion, but good for this, but try yourself and see how you go. And that was always my approach, is just, I loved the idea that you could try and pull back if it didn't work, try and pull back. So I would always just try things, and where I wasn't strong and I was honest with myself about that, I would find people to teach me until I thought that I was well-rounded enough to go and teach other people.
I love that approach. I love that you were obsessed about upskilling. And I think it's a great message for our audience. Align yourself with the experts, learn as much as you can, empower yourself to make decisions, and don't go in blind. So I love that. And you're right, Paul, like it's a big responsibility working with businesses. As you said, there's a lot on the line, as a consultant. And I see a consultant a bit different to a coach. I think in consulting, if you've had that real life experience yourself, it's a totally different dynamic. Coaching is a little bit of a different, approach, but I think it's very powerful when you're working with a consultant such as yourself that's had, been through the school of hard knocks essentially, and proven your methodology in your own business and during your own career before,
I
imparting that
think
to
so.
others.
Yeah, yeah, because it's also not about the wins, it's about the losses, and I've had
Yeah.
more than my fair share of those. And it's okay to make mistakes, once.
Yes.
And I've made those mistakes, but that's a really good point you make, because there are a lot of coaches out there who'll just tell you the theory of what you should do, and the practicality is completely different.
Mm.
And that's a little thing that I believe is, like, if someone says to me, "Hey, Paul, I want to try X, Y, and Z," and if I genuinely don't know the answer, my answer is I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not going to tell you regurgitate what I've read in a book or what I've read on LinkedIn from somebody else. I'll just be like, I don't know. And then the same goes, one of my leather clients who does leather brand, he said, all right, Paul, next session we were in a board meeting. He goes, what's a product you would love to see us do next year, next quarter, or next year? And I was like, That's not what I'm here for, my friend. Like, and anybody here who goes around the room and tells you how to do product when they're not from that background is
Mm.
just a waste of time. I said, look, I think I said leather pants as a joke. I said, mate, you're the creative. You're great at that. I'm not the guy that comes in and tells you, well, have you thought about doing belts? No, I know where my strengths are, and I don't think you need to be leaning in and giving clients advice where you're not qualified, basically.
Yeah, I love that. You've got to respect the craft, right? And lean into
Yeah.
your area of expertise and bring in others that are experts in other fields.
Totally, totally.
Paul, is there a point of difference that you have when you look at the marketplace at the moment and you see everything playing out? You see other, whether it's business consultants or e-commerce consultants. Do you have a point of difference to your approach in terms of how you're seeing everything else playing out across industry?
Yeah, I think so. I'm profit focused. So again, I've been there and I've done it and I've lost the money and I understand how to make the money. And so I'm profit and cash focused. And that's hard. We've seen many fashion businesses over the last couple of years go bankrupt, go into administration, some of them who are profitable on paper. It's like, well, how can they be profitable on paper but run out of money? They're two different things. So my ethos or my mantra is that I'm profit first, and I'm here to help improve the lives of the founders that I work with, and I believe that it's cash and profit that does that. I'm not impressed by a Shopify screenshot that says we made $1 million this month and it was all through discounting. My thing is, yeah, that's good. Show me your bank account. Let's see how your bank account's the number one KPI in terms of how you're going. It doesn't matter what I say or anybody. It's like your bank account will tell you if your strategy is working.
Yeah.
And so that's my approach, is always to focus on profit. And that comes not just from sales, it comes from buying, it comes from range planning, it comes from ops, it comes from logistics, from how much you spend on wages, the whole thing. So the way I work is I benchmark all of those costs in the business. And that's kind of how my brain works. If your margins 75%, you can probably spend 30% on 25% on ads. If your margin's 60%, you've got to spend 10% on ads. A lot of other people will just go, you got to spend 30% on ads. It's like,
Mm,
but you know nothing about my business. You
yeah.
know nothing about what I want to do with my life. So what I mean by that is I sit down with the founder and I'm like, cool, where do you want to be in your life? What does your life look like? How much money do you need to live that life? And I kind of work backwards from there to say, well, you'll need to be earning this much, which means that your net profit will have to be this much, which means your revenue will have to be this much, which means that you have to spend this much running your business. Rather than me coming in and saying, Elizabeth, you should spend 35% on ads and that's the norm. Everybody has different desires. You have some brands that just want to scale and make 10% profit. You have other ones like Zimmerman who make 30% net profit.
Mm,
So by rights, they must spend a hell of a lot less on advertising than somebody else who's making 10. So we've got to understand the founder's goals and visions and then tailor something that works for them. The numbers will then present themselves
yeah.
rather than these people that just come in and be like, oh, you're only spending that. You've got to spend more. And I think the other area that I would like to say that my clients sometimes say to me is that I'm brutally honest. And I'm unapologetic about that because if someone comes to me and says like, here's my plan, what do you think? And I think it sucks, I'll tell them it sucks, because what happens if I don't is they'll buy the stock, it won't move, they'll fall into debt, they'll borrow to get. And so my job starts in the first conversation, and I vet every single brand I work with. I don't take all brands, I take the right brands.
Yeah.
And in that vetting process, which is pretty extensive, I kind of just rule it out then and there. My job starts there to say, listen, I don't think this is going to work. And sometimes that's tough, but that's my job. If I take my job seriously to help people make money, well, that starts with the first conversation. So I like to think that I'm honest and tough enough to tell people. And the other thing is, like, I pick and choose who I work with, and I won't work with idiots.
Mm. I,
That's
res- I respect that approach, that's for sure.
yeah,
But I
yeah,
love your approach, and I love that it starts with the founder or the business owner first. It's what are their
yeah,
goals, and everything is reverse engineered
yeah,
to ensure that those goals are well supported. And there's no one size fits all. I get that question a lot as well. It's like, what are the metrics? Like, just give me the magic framework. There is no magic framework because it varies from business to business and category to category. There's so many, dynamics at play.
yeah.
How,
You're
how,
spot on. Yeah.
however, I'm sure our listeners are going to be looking for the $1,000,000 answer. So let's maybe talk about, based on your experience, and you've worked with amazing leading fashion brands because our audience is, in fashion, retail, and wholesale. What are some of the, challenges that you've seen brands facing consistently over the journey that you've assisted them to break through to get to that other side and start to scale, Paul?
Do you know what? I feel sorry for like new beginners to fashion because there's such a lot of garbage information out there about, what you need to do. And I started this new business, Ecom 100, where I've got coaches and also like I've scaled it up a little bit. And so I'm listening to more brands and it's pretty scary what's coming back. There's a common theme here that you've got to spend 30% on advertising, and common theme here that people just don't, they want to learn Facebook inside out, but they don't know their gross profit, or they don't know what COGS is, or they don't know how to develop a buy plan. It's super scary.
Yeah.
One of my oldest women's fashion clients is turning over 10 million bucks a month, and they're on a 35% net profit. So you can do it. And they spend 13% on ads. They spend 7% on wages. You can do it. You don't need to believe what you've watched on a YouTube video or some guy on Instagram who tells you, here's the magic framework. You've got to pump 30% into ads and just run your ads like this. Fashion is, maybe it's fickle. It's not that fickle that it's just about the ads that you run. There still has to be something to the DNA. There still has to be something to the story. So what I would say is, the best anecdote that I could give is, let's think about this. There's a brand, two fashion brands, and this is a real life scenario. And they were working with the advertising agency that does Louis Vuitton. So phenomenal, global paid media agency. And the ROAS with Louis Vuitton, let's say, was,
Yeah.
God knows, 30, 100, whatever it was. Very good,
Yeah.
let's say.
Yeah.
Same strategy, same special sauce, same structure, same framework, same teaching, same everything applied to this other brand, delivering a ROAS of 1.5. Same agency, same account manager, same strategy, but vastly different results. So I say to the brand, so what, you tell me what the difference is. The difference is you. The difference is what you're putting out there, because your brand still has to resonate. If I can, if someone comes along to me and says, here's my brand, I'm not spending anything on paid media, but I'm making, as a brand said to me last week, I'm doing 60,000 a month in sales. And that's where I'm excited, because that's scale time. I don't look into Facebook ads and say, okay, show me what you do. No, I want to see the ones who have the cult following. And you think about the Zimmermans and stuff, starting at the markets and developing a cult following. You think about the Subies, you think about the, PE nations, they develop followings,
Mm-hmm.
either for the founder or for being cool or whatever. And then the rest is easy. And so I think when you, like, we all have a job, fashion brand, everyone, to try and be the best at what we do. I'm going to be the best at vacation wear. I'm going to be the best at whatever it is. If you bring a great business to any consultant, you'll be okay. A great product, a great brand, something that has a cult following.
Yeah.
But if you're bringing a subpar product to market that's like 30 generic dresses that are off Alibaba that are same as what every other one's doing, but your strategy is just to, pump out lots of ads, it's not exciting. It's boring. It's not what business is about. So I would say the key factor is focus on the brand before worrying about the advertising.
Yeah.
Focus on the product and the brand. Like, who do you speak to? Why? How do you speak to them? Why would they follow you? Not why would they buy from you? Why would people follow this brand? Why would people be engaged in it? I work with Proud Poppy. That's a great example. Tara has a connection with her audience. People want to be part of the family. They don't just transact. They
Mm-hmm.
belong. How do you get that sense of belonging? I guess when it comes to the boring part, I think it's really hard these days to operate on a margin in fashion, particularly women's fashion. I would usually say 70%. I reckon it's like 75% is almost becoming
Yeah.
the minimum. And I know that's hard for people to hear, but it's getting hard out there. So
Yeah.
if you're, and I have one women's fashion brand I'm working with whose margins are well below that, it's like it's not going to work. I'm just, rising cost of doing business. Women's fashion is arguably the most competitive space in the world.
Yeah.
And, that means everybody's throwing advertising dollars at it. I think you've got to be minimum 70. And I'm going to say in the next year or so, that's 75% on your margins. And I would also add when it comes to margin protection is like, so many women's fashion brands or fashion brands in particular spend 11 months of the year trying to tell us how elevated they are, how luxe they are, how affordable luxe they are, how prestige they are, and then they get 30% off here, there, and everywhere. It's a mixed message. Your customers aren't stupid. They'll learn that you go on sale, and that's how you pull a brand down. How you pull a brand up, we use what I'm wearing today, the Geedup model, is you just don't go on sale. If price leadership is your strategy, go on sale. That's not what I'm talking about. But if quality and prestige and allure and desirability are your USPs, then going on sale all the time doesn't align to that strategy. You go on sale when your balance sheet tells you to go on sale, not, when the market tells you to go on sale.
Yeah, I love that. You've shared some important points there. I like what you articulated between the balance of brand marketing and performance marketing. I
Yeah.
couldn't agree more. It's brand first, building a community, building a profile. So important. But I'd love to use the $10 million business at 35 net as an example. I'm pretty sure there's some ears that have pricked up listening to that particular
Yeah.
result.
That's 10 million a month.
Not bad. Not
Yeah.
bad. Got 10 million a month at 35%.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
actually it's 37%, and it's soon they'll be 13 million a month.
All right. So could we unpack a few of the strategies that have gone behind achieving a result like that, Paul?
Absolutely. When I started working with these people, the turnover was about 300 grand,
Yep.
and they were losing money. And so what we did is we knew that these guys had something, like they were, they got their audience. That was clear. That wasn't really the problem. What we did is we built a framework, because a lot of creatives, they just want a framework that they can operate within. And you might touch on this soon, but I have a 50-30-20 framework that I sort of say, well, you're a great creative. Now that's good. Now stay within these parameters: 70% margin, or maybe 75, 10% logistics, 7% wages. So we built these frameworks again that helped them hit the net profit target that they told me they needed. Right. So I'm big on that. Okay, so you want to hit a net profit, you want to be highly profitable, 35%. Your margin is this. Okay, let's say your margin is, I don't know, let's just say, well, let's actually use their numbers. So in this instance, their gross profit is 68.
Yeah.
Their desired net profit was 35. And
Yeah.
we worked that out by saying, well, we want to turn over 13 million, and I want to buy a house here. And we reverse engineer. We want to sell for this. So we reverse engineer. Well, you'll probably need to get that money, pull out half of it. You'll need a net profit of 35. So what that means is 68 minus 35. I think I said 68 or 67, whatever I said, equals 33.
Yeah.
So you have to run your business on 33. That's not anyone's opinion on this and that. That's fact. Your margin is this minus your desired net profit. There, go and run your business on 33%. And that's what they did. And we split that up: paid media, marketing, paid media, brand advertising, rent, wages, split it all up. They said, oh, great, I get it. I'll stick within that.
Yeah.
And that's what they did. Now, when that particular brand had their first jump, I reckon it was because there was a point where we were probably like $1 million a month. And we ran a report in Shopify that showed that they were losing something like 300 grand a month through out of stocks on grade A product. Okay, ran that report. That was like pretty eye-opening because fashion brands, the lowest hanging fruit is usually your out of stocks on grade A. That's just easy money. So we fixed that up. We shifted off, got our demand planning right, shifted off air freight onto sea freight, further improved the margin. And that was got that stock back in, got that stock constantly at the right amount of cover, which might have been about 10 weeks at the time. Previously, we'd been struggling at 6 weeks cover. Doesn't work when you're sea freighting from China. And got that cover up, fine, revenue started flowing. Probably got stuck on around the 2 million a month mark, and then COVID hit and 80% of the sales dropped. And then things started picking up again. We started dropping more product, at least once a month, if not twice a month. Found that every time we dropped product, that just set things on fire. We got the high halo effect of socials were going great. This particular business, we just found that dropping product more frequently was good. So we did that 1 to 2 times a month. And then I guess got stuck at about that 2 million mark point and tried very heavily in the US, and it just wasn't happening. Just wasn't happening in the US. Wasn't clicking, overspending, just couldn't scale it. Revenue was okay, but couldn't scale it. And then probably switched to a US first strategy where we did the photo shoots in the US, local content, US models, a lot of US influencers, just US first approach. And I think there's a sort of tipping point where you can probably get to about 20 million here in women's fashion. And then, those that are on the 100 mil, they're in the US. They're US predominantly. And that's what happened. So now we're probably like 12, 13 million a month, and it's 86% US revenue. And I've had a look under the hood of most of the e-com fashion brands, the ones that everybody knows. And that's usually the story. It's like hit your ceiling here of 20 mil. There are not many who would be doing more than $50 million just out of Australia. That would be pretty unique. So you sort of get to 20 and then pivot to overseas. But by the same token, that's hard. You got to go all in. You got to really throw yourself into it, and you got to burn a bit of money on the journey. So you've got to be really in control of what you do, and you've got to tap out Australia first. There's no point doing 3 million in Australia and then saying, I'm ready to take over the US. If you're getting up to 10 or 20 million in Australia, the US will get hold of you. They'll see you. They'll be, working with Who is Elijah, a perfume brand at the moment. This is it. It's organic. Organic traction coming through the US, and then you double down. You don't force it. You just wait for a little bit of a nibble, and then you go fishing where the fish are.
Yeah, absolutely love that. Well, firstly, congratulations to you and the brand involved, because they are phenomenal results, Paul. Outstanding. So yeah,
They're a dark horse as well.
Yeah.
I reckon people try and guess who they are and wouldn't get it. But the thing is, I always have a giggle because we see on the ASX and so on, we see brands like, and Temple and Webster, everyone two weeks ago saying how amazing they did to record a $13 million profit. And I'm here and that's great. And I think they do a great job, but I'm here sort of thinking, my client here in the next 12 months, I mean, they're doing 4 million a month profit.
Yeah, phenomenal. Let's talk about that 33%. So 33 OPEX. How were they able to do it? Because that includes marketing, right?
Yeah.
So we're talking about your expenses, your business expenses and marketing included. So the 68, 33 for a net of 35.
Yeah.
What did they fine tune to be able to achieve that?
So people tend to pull their particularly Facebook ads out of that equation for some reason. Like, well, it's an expense. So if you think about it, and I say to them, well, and I have a 50-30-20 rule, which says 50 gross profit, 30 OPEX, 20 net profit. 50 minus 30 equals 20. So get down to that 30% OPEX if you can. That's pretty good, but there's definitely businesses doing it.
Yeah.
So if you think about your operating expenses, there's only 2 things that stand out. And it's wages and marketing. The rest is rats and mice. Like it is. So we know we've got to tackle those 2 items. And people will say that you should scale, that you scale as you scale, magical word, scale, that your fixed costs just go away. Well, let's think about that. Our biggest fixed costs in an e-commerce business are actually variable. They're marketing, which is a variable, is typically set as a percentage of revenue, and
Yeah.
wages, which has to be set as a percentage of revenue, because as you're bigger, you get more work and you need more staff. So those two things are 95% of your operating expenses.
Yeah.
So it's a complete myth that scale fixes profitability. Not in e-commerce, it just doesn't. We're not sitting here in giant warehouses. We're not machines that can pump out an infinite amount of product for the same, for the same amount. We have to
Yeah.
scale up. So the first thing is that businesses can often scale their expenses a lot quicker than their revenue and than their profits. So we're getting bigger, we scale up our expenses. It usually goes that way and not the other way around. So when we do it with this 33% OPEX, we're just sort of saying, well, here's a couple of their metrics. We're at 13% marketing.
Yeah.
That's paid media.
Yeah.
We'll spend a little bit on offline media. So we'll do some activations. That's usually a fixed cost, depending on what the team needs. We do about 15 grand a month on influencer. And we do 7% on wages. We typically aim for 1 to 2% on rent, not including warehouse. That's head office rent. We try and run our logistics department, because they have their own warehouse, on 15%. That goes up under cost of sales. So that's not under OPEX, but nonetheless, that's an interesting benchmark. And then the rest is honestly rats and mice, because it's like, so that's 14 on marketing, plus 14 on marketing plus 7 on wages. That's 21 of our 33 gone. So that's more than half. The rest is just your, as I said, your 1 to 2% on rent, your subscriptions, which in this business, might be 20 grand a month now, but they're doing a lot.
Yeah.
Very few contractors. Very simple business, very simple operators. Typically as few staff as possible, not as many staff as possible.
Yeah.
And the key is scrutiny. So we just always, even 2 weeks ago, they rang me and said, let's do some budgeting. What can I spend on PR? And that's what we do. We just benchmark it like, okay, yep. What do you need to spend? Yep, that falls under budget. That's not going to impact your 33%. Now, obviously, it's a hell of a lot easier when you're doing, 14 mil a month now. But when we were doing 300 grand a year, it's just the exact same approach. It's just split it all up. What would happen if we took our paid media up 2%? Your profit will fall 2%. So it's just being aware of what happens if, and not just doing things blindly. And scrutiny, just the number one thing is scrutiny, just getting in those numbers. It doesn't have to be fancy, and just getting in there and benchmarking them and talking about them.
Some great insights there, Paul, for our listeners to do a little bit of a health check on their own businesses. So let's just go a little bit more into your 50, 30, 20 framework. And I think I watched one of your social media posts the other day, and you're saying, forget about the 10% net. You should be aiming for that 20 to 30 where possible. For those in the early days, let's just say they're a small business, they're either a startup or they're a small business in the first few years of business. How realistic is getting to that 20 pretty swiftly, and then to the 30? Does it take, is there a runway of time based on all of the initial, startup costs that everyone has to take on and all of the other moving parts?
Yeah, you're definitely going to have some sunk costs at the start. Depends on how you want to handle those, write them all off in month one or kind of amortize them. But, I much like yourself, I have two things that I do. I help 7 figures scale, and I help startups. And with the startups, my goal is under 90 days, you should be breaking even. And I know that's hard, but it's doable. And it, it also comes down to appetite. So if someone says, I want to be 30% net profit in the first year, if they're coming at it with a 90% margin, as a lot of jewelry brands are, you probably do it. If you're coming at it with a 70% margin, as a lot of fashion brands are, you could probably do it at the expense of revenue. So in other words, because again, what does it come down to? Really, marketing largely in your first year, because you have no repeat purchases, you have no customers, you have no one that knows about you. So typically when I'm starting a new business, I'll scale up my marketing spend in month 1, 2, and 3 dramatically, like very dramatically, like 100%. Recently as men's suit business, he's got retail stores. He wanted to go online. I said, give me, let's go 15 grand on ads in the first month. And he goes, great, what are we going to make? And I said, we're going to budget for 15 grand in sales. He was like, that's terrible. I said, yeah, but you'll be prepared for it, you know? So let's do this so that we're prepared, because what you often find is that good ideas fizzle out because people run out of money. So I'll say, well, let's do 15. And he actually did 30. So he was really happy. But if he'd said, I want to do 80, and then he did 30. So it's about managing expectations.
Yep.
But if you're gently, like I've got a few brands that in my group, fashion brands, that are probably coming from, they're probably around the 50 to 100 grand a month mark. And we would want them at 20%, 18, 20% at the end of the first year.
Yeah.
Just so and really what's that coming down to? Well, typically you're starting without many wages, so almost no wages. And we do need to build a wage budget in, because otherwise what the hell's the point? So we do build that in. And so there's a point where the wage ratio looks a bit out of whack until the revenue grows. But at the same time, we're decreasing the paid media spend. You know, I want the paid media for a fashion brand under 20% within a year. Yep. So I think you should be aiming for about 18, you know, nudging 15 to 20 at the end of the first year. In the second year, I think absolutely by the end of the second year, you could be at that 25% mark. Yeah. The tip is, like, the trick is come in with as higher margin as you can. That's your wiggle room. If you're coming in like a furniture business where margins are like 40%, well, you're never going to get anywhere near 20% net profit. Yeah. So if you can come in with a big, healthy margin, which is part of the reason I like jewelry, 90% margin, come in with that, you should be able to hit 30% in the second year, I reckon.
Yeah. Do you get involved, Paul, in, you know, optimizing the gross profit margin? So do you get involved in supply chain and helping brands negotiate, and even beyond the margin, extended trading terms, so that it's assisting with cash flow? What's your point of view in that area?
Yeah, so, you know, the ability to make cash and cash different to profit. So the benchmark in women's fashion now, I shouldn't say women's fashion, is that if you're still on these old terms of 30% deposit, 70% before shipment, you're going to find it really hard to pay yourself a good wage or to take dividends. Throw into that mix the fact that you are trying to grow, which requires capital. Then give me the golden trifecta of being a wholesale brand, and you're pretty much finished. You're finished, especially if you're trying to hold stock and sell it instead of indenting. Let's flip that on its head and say where you should be at. And it's obvious why, right? 30% deposit, 45 days to make the goods, 70% balance, 30 days on water to ship it. Then I get my stuff out and hopefully sell it through in 3 months if I'm lucky, 3-month cover. That's 6 months from start to finish of no money. Yep. And we're in fashion where we're trying to drop 12 times a year, but it's taking us six months to work through our range. That logic doesn't add up. So the golden rule, right? This is what every fashion brand should aspire to. And I can promise you you can do it. No matter how much your supplier will tell you can't. 70% margin is a 30% COG, the cost of goods sold. If you get your stock in, no deposit, and you pay the balance 30 days after shipment, so you've paid nothing, you've landed it, you've got 30 days to pay it. And that's what David Jones do to us. So this is not my idea. This is retail 101. It's just like, let's do it back to the suppliers. We've had it done to us by the wholesale customers. So 30% COG. If I'm buying for 3 months cover, which is about right for a fashion brand out of China, when you factor in your lead times, if you're not air freighting, like, try and do less, but realistically 3 months is about right. If you buy that stock, let's say it's 100 grand at retail, and you've got a 30% COG, that means you've paid 30 grand for that stock. I said it's 100 grand at retail. Yep. So I've got this 100 grand shipment landing today, and I've bought for 3 months cover. I'm good with my cover. That means I'll have sold 33% after month 1. So my sell-through has to hit 33%. So 33% of 100 grand will be sold on the 4th week. Yep. 33% is 33 grand, which covers the 30 grand that I owe the supplier. And that's the golden thing we all need to aim for. If you can do that, net 30, sell through a third in 30 days with a 30% COG, it's almost like a 30-30-30 rule. Yeah. You will never pay $1 for stock again in your life. And I'll let you in on a secret. These guys here, the Geedup who I'm
Yeah.
wearing, they do good turnover. Where
Yeah.
do they get the money for the Ferraris and the car? That's cash. That's cash because they're on very good payment terms and they
Yeah.
sell everything before they pay for a cent. So brands have got to work harder at those payment terms, particularly out of China.
Yeah, yeah. Can I just ask, in your experience, is the 30 days or 60 days payment terms? Because I know what my experience is in the industry, but have you observed that it takes time to get there? Obviously, if you're new, if you're a startup again, or you're starting fresh with a new supply chain partner, there's a period of, building the relationship, nurturing the relationship. Have you seen brands be able to get those kind of terms before they've even placed their first order? Or
Not
is
really.
it period of time, each party proving themselves,
Yeah.
being in it for the long game? How does that typically play out?
Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen anyone get it on day one. I think the quickest I've seen is shout out to Zane from Maison de Sabre,
Yeah.
who was on these 30-70 terms, 30% deposit, 70% balance. And then we worked really hard on changing that mentality. And he went over to China and he did his trips face to face and he did his calls. And he, within, let's say, 6 months, had transitioned all of the suppliers to the worst terms were net 60.
Yeah.
Now he's an extreme case because I call him the axe man. He just goes in and goes extremely hard. And I saw him on some of the calls with the suppliers, and I was like, oh, this is pretty cringeworthy. But he got the job done. So he's the quickest, and he had all of his suppliers transitioned in 6 months. But it was hard, and there were some really tough conversations. But in my group at the moment, Ecom 100, which is the 7-figure and above groups, that's a hot topic for us.
Yeah.
And a lot of them are getting these 30-day terms now, but yeah, very hard in day one. My advice there would be like float the idea
Yeah.
with the supplier, prove yourself, pay early. So when you eventually get those payment terms, pay early. You got 30-day payment terms, pay them after 14. This is particularly out of China. That's a big trust thing. That's really important.
Yeah.
But no, I think it's something that you probably will not get straight away, but you should never stop asking.
Yeah, I think it's an important point to share because, everyone wants the terms, and the model that you shared is, it's a golden model to be able to do that, to be able to get those extended terms and essentially, trade before you've had to pay that invoice for the
Yeah.
shipment. But in the early days, just in my experience, again, working with startups and also 7-figure businesses and beyond, it's such a different dynamic. When the big boys are going in to negotiate with a manufacturer, it's a different dynamic. But when you're placing your first or second order, it's typically that 30% deposit and the 70% on shipment because, again, I mean, there's risk involved. So,
Mm.
the manufacturer's not going to take the full risk. But as long as you articulate at the very beginning that as business goes further down the track, you are looking for extended terms, I think sharing that at the beginning of the journey is really important so that everyone knows what they're working towards.
Yeah.
But yeah, couldn't agree more. It is a model definitely to work towards. Paul, you've spoken a lot about data, the numbers, and being, intimate with those numbers. For those perhaps that are tuning in and are not very intimate with their numbers at the moment, what would you share around making those data-driven decisions, and how can they move forward, step forward to do better in that space?
Yeah, I think not, again, it's been an eye-opener for me to kind of start my new consulting business where I'm working with a lot more brands, just to start speaking to brands again, because I didn't do that for a while. And just hearing that some of them just don't look at numbers at all, don't look at data at all. It's a bit worrying. I think like the analogy that I would use is, I mean, let's talk about financial analytics for a second. Demand planning in a moment as well. But you know, we're all trying to run fashion businesses that are worth, I don't know, 10 million, 1 million, 10 million, 20 million, 30 million. Now, if you saw an ad in the paper or in Seek, I don't put the ads in the paper anymore, maybe, but an ad in Seek saying, wanted CEO of $50 million apparel business, would you put yourself forward as the best candidate? And if the answer is no, which it will be, Why would you accept that in your own business, which presumably you value even more than that business in the paper? So we must hold ourselves to a higher standard. And it's not okay to say, I'm just not good at numbers. I'm just not good at data. Because the question that comes back to you from me is, what have you done in the last 6 months to nail the numbers? What have you done in the last 6 months to make you good at the data? And the answer is generally just, I'm not good at it because I haven't focused on it. But human beings are pretty smart. If we turn our attention to it, we should be able to get much, much better at it. The data by demand planners, in my opinion, in fashion are worth their weight in gold. And if you look at the best demand planners, they're number bods. They're analytical. They are data driven. They're not necessarily, they couldn't tell you if a yellow dress will sell or a black one, but they'll tell you how many units you need to buy to avoid out of stock or to hit your sales target. That stuff is all pretty teachable. And my advice there would be that there's some great demand planning tools, analytical tools. Let's say in fashion, there's Style Arcade, there's Inventory Planner, there's so many cool things, but don't skip to those things without learning the basics yourself. If you can learn the basics yourself in a spreadsheet, then when you do adopt those bigger platforms, those business intelligence tools, you'll also be heaps better at using them. So I think it's just it's really just kind of learning to swim before you take yourself to the Olympics, and making sure that you're, I don't think you really realistically need to be a GA4 expert or but you do need to know what sell-through rate is. You do need to know about inventory cover. You do need to know about COGS if you want to take this business seriously. And, some of the best business people that I've worked with in fashion, Jane Liu included, are incredibly strong in that area. And that can be a competitive advantage. So, master the monotony, do the boring stuff, because there's a lot of growth to be had in the boring stuff.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And do you typically see, Paul, that businesses leave it quite late, like they're pushing that boundary before they realise that we need that demand planner or merchandise planner in place? Because I see a lot of businesses in the early days, it's quite simple in the early days because you're typically buying to the minimum order quantities.
Yeah.
But of course, when you start to scale and everything's getting more sophisticated, your inventory can get away from you in light speed. So is there a certain kind of size of business that kind of look at that's the moment in time where they need to be investing in actually having a merchandise or demand planner in the business and using the tools like Style Arcade?
Yeah, I think you nailed it there. Like it's pretty easy at the start. You buy your quantities, you move through it. And this is the point, is that it's scale that usually creates the problems, because if you over order when you're doing 200 grand a year, that's not really a problem. Your quantities are low. But if you get it wrong when you're doing 20, 30, 40 million a year, those little errors are incredibly costly. You just need one bad season and you're sunk, or you're on 6 months cover. You need to discount. Discounting spells the end for your brand. If they buy your sales stuff, not your full price. Women's fashion, we've seen this time and time again this year alone. Demand planning is going to be hard for smaller brands to hire somebody because there's not many good ones around, and they'll want decent salaries. There's a lot of bad ones around who probably don't quite know what demand planning is. They get it confused maybe with visual merchandising. But I think, I would probably, like, even Style Arcade's a bit expensive for a startup. So I think you just, like, if you're using Shopify, go into Shopify and you should be able to tell me what each of the reports does and how to use them. That's a good starting point. If you can do that, like, little unknown fact here is that Shopify has the ability to nice little purchase order system. Nobody using it really, but there's nice purchase orders there. So we don't need to jump necessarily to like a Sin 7 or an Unleashed or whatever it might be when we're not even doing purchase orders in Shopify. So I think it's just starting with the basics, master the reporting. There's some great reporting, particularly in Shopify, the ABC analysis, the days by depletion report. Get your cost prices in Shopify and your stock so you can get familiar with COGS reports. Get all that happening, get down and dirty with that stuff. And then when you've got a grasp on it and you may be turning over a couple of mil, then you might want to, I reckon you could honestly get to 5 mil easily if you don't need a demand planning, but you're taking it seriously yourself, for
Yeah.
sure. Maybe
I,
even more.
I would agree. I think it's just before that 5 mil point is where I see, things starting to come undone. So
Yeah,
I think bracing yourself, being well prepared for that next stage of business at that point in time is absolutely crucial. But
yeah,
again, I agree, find the tool that's right for your stage of business and start to implement some of these disciplines early on so that when you get to that stage where you're about to go next level, you're not learning at that point, you're already well
exactly,
versed in the way to manage your inventory.
exactly.
Paul, anything from an AI innovation technology standpoint that you'd like to mention to the audience that you think, is something that we need to have on the radar for ecom?
I'm having a lot of fun with ChatGPT.
Yeah.
And I note that it'll be inbuilt in the new iPhone. Shopify's done some great stuff with, look, we're pretty lucky in that, particularly in e-commerce, Shopify will latch on to most of the stuff that we need to do with AI. I think where it'll be interesting is some of the smaller brands listening or startups. I reckon you'll be able to do some pretty good creative using AI. You already can using Midjourney and stuff like that. But I think, again, creative expenses, particularly in fashion, not uncommon to drop pretty big money on a photo shoot.
Yeah.
And I'm here asking people to do a drop every month. That's pretty expensive. So I think the ability to do campaigns using AI, whether that's in, Midjourney or within Shopify or some other tool that people have heard of, I think that's going to level the playing field a little bit. Like take this range of shirts, put them on a model in the middle of the Sahara Desert.
Yeah.
All of that sort of stuff, I think, is we're going to have to look at because there's a rising cost of wages, there's the rising cost of paid media, costs are rising. So I think we're going to have to kind of push back on some of these creative and copy expenses. And I do believe that AI will not replace people, but I think that AI will be able to help kind of keep the costs of creative a little bit under control,
Yeah.
particularly allowing those, smaller fashion businesses is often a little bit like they look small.
Yeah.
And then there's the trust issue because they're like, oh, what's the quality like? And marketing's just about perception, isn't it?
Yeah.
So part of the way that we alter perception is through the appearance of our ads and our creative and our copy. So if, sole operators or small businesses can up their game and match it with the big players, I think that's pretty exciting. And if I was starting a fashion business today, um, I would do my best to work out how I can leverage AI. There's the obvious stuff like SEO and writing product descriptions and stuff like that, but that's all par for the course now. I reckon that's table stakes now, but I'm really excited to see brands doing more. I think Volvo did one recently, more full-blown campaigns using AI.
Yeah. Love it. Love it. Great insights there. Now, Paul, you operate at quite a high standard and dynamic level. We know that mindset is a huge part of being in business. Do you have any practices, routines, or support systems that help you with mindset and well-being that allow you to operate at such a high
Oh,
level?
oh, do I? Yeah, I need them. I mean, I kind of my brain's a bit OCD,
Yeah.
a bit obsessive. That can be a good thing and a bad thing because when I get into the moment, I zero in on a topic like cogs. I won't stop until I understand cogs. But
Yeah.
you have to know when to switch off from that as well. So, I meditate every day. I walk. I try and do my 10,000 steps minimum every day. Just listening to a meditation app. I do. I mean, I've got to put that stuff in my life.
Yeah.
I do a float tank once a month just to try and do some sensory deprivation, take the phone away, all of that stuff. Speak through counselor and so on, just to regroup and make sure that there's balance in my life. And I've kind of wrestled between, the last decade, particularly the last 5 years, thinking like I've got to write a book and it's got to be number one. And then I've got to do another one. And then I've got to start a business and I've got to have another business. And you work in 40 hours, I've got to work 50 hours. And I thought that was the way. And there's people out there that tell you that that's the way, that you just, rest when you're dead kind of thing. And I genuinely thought that was. And now, and don't get me wrong, like I did all that and it helped me. It did, but there's a cost to that. But now I'm sort of like, I kind of don't want to, I understand that I'm saying this somewhat from a position of privilege, but now I'm like, I'm going to start working 4 days a week and spend Fridays with my kids. I've got 3 girls. That's what matters to me. Now, I understand again that I can do that, but I know that part of the journey to getting to this point was that really hard work. But I think it's just, it's all about perspective. You can't do everything. And I'm talking largely to myself here. Perfect is the enemy of good. Don't overthink things. Just do your best, put it out there, do good work, and things usually work themselves out. The end of the night, I just like to be able to put my head on the pillow and sleep, knowing that I've done the right thing and I'm pretty good bloke, and that's enough for me. But I think founders are hard on themselves. So I see a lot of founders come to me and they're like, "Oh, I'm so silly. I've made this mistake. Have you seen it?" I said, "Of course I've seen this before. It was me. I've done this before." Like, don't be too hard on yourself. It's really the mistakes that you're making, I can guarantee you other people are making them. It's okay to admit to mistakes. But just be easy. Business is hard. Be easy on yourself. Take it easy and, don't work too much.
Yeah, powerful insights there, Paul. Thank you for sharing. Now, in closing, what excites you most about the future of the e-commerce space, Paul?
I think generally speaking, it's what we sometimes think is like what my wife says to me every day, which is like, because I get the itch to start a new business and she says, "Oh, all the good ideas have been done. It's been done." Now, look, there's no question that we're in a golden era of e-commerce and people say it's finished. We're in a hard spot right now, for sure. Retail's tough. It'll get better. But what we've got to remember is that we're only in e-commerce 20% of total retail spend. So think about that. We're still small.
Yeah.
People think, "Oh, it's been done." It hasn't been done. The reality is, I reckon someone listening to this now could go and start a business today and in 20 years still be considered a pretty early adopter of e-commerce. It's all about perspective. Right now, we wouldn't say that, but in 20, 30 years, 40 years, it'll be a hell of a lot harder because there'll be more Temus, more Shein, like everybody will be in it. Now it's only 20%. So you're in a golden age. If there was ever a time to try and get in and make some money, now is the time. And I think in 10 years, give or take, e-commerce will be 50-50. So double again, 50-50 with traditional retail. That's what I think. And I haven't read any data to support that, but I look at my 3 daughters who can use an iPad better than me, and the process of evolution will tell me that there'll be more of those people than there are now in 10 years, and less other people who don't shop. So I think the process of evolution will mean that e-commerce is in a pretty good place.
I love it. Nurture those little entrepreneurs in the household.
Yeah, that's right.
Paul, thank you for being so generous with your time and your knowledge today. I absolutely love your work. Every time you show up in my feed, I learn something new. So thank you for the amazing information you put out to the world. You've got amazing programs. You've got your consulting. How can people find you, Paul?
Yeah, thank you. You can find me at learnecommerce.com.au and you can see my startup or scale up options, or give me a follow on Instagram at Paul Waddy Ecommerce and watch a few of my videos, I guess.
Yeah, definitely follow Paul. You'll learn something every post. Paul, thank you again. We finally did it. We made it happen and can't wait to share this with the world.
Thanks, Elizabeth.
Thank you so much for listening to the Fashion Business Mindset podcast. We'd love to keep connected. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook at Fashion Equipped. And if you'd like to find out more about our Start Your Fashion Business program and your mentor collective, head to our website fashionequipped.com.au. If you've enjoyed this episode, please share this podcast with others, hit subscribe, leave us a rating and review. Let's do this together. Let's make the fashion business your business.
This is a Guide Your Light network production, creating podcasts with purpose.